Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Groove Talk. These episodes are brought to you by all of the kind folks who donate to the show on a monthly basis using our Patreon page. If you would like to be one of those awesome individuals, please visit www.patreon.com/FrogE That's frog, the letter E, _style. You will gain access to cool rewards based on how much you donate. You can donate as little as $1 per month, which is only $12 per year, or as much as $50 per month, which is way more than $12 per year. If you do donate the minimum amount, which is $1 per month, you gain access to a bunch of cool bonus content. We just released the first episode of the Big Think bonus series. In that bonus series, basically what we do is we take certain ethics problems and we examine them and discuss them at length. Each episode is about 20 minutes to half an hour long. In the first episode, me and Brendan discussed the classic, trolley problem. And that is if you have a train that is barreling down the tracks towards 5 people who are stuck on the tracks, you can pull a lever and divert the train, and that train will hit one person instead. So we discussed that problem at length and what you would do and the implications of that, and it was a really fun time, and I highly recommend that you check it out. You will also gain access to the Tales from the Tabletop live sessions, and basically what that is it's just me and my friends playing D&D, and it's live recordings of those D&D sessions. So if you're interested in that, I also recommend you check that out. It's really fun. I'm sure there's a lot of really funny content in there. If you are a tabletop fan at all, you know how ridiculous it can get. Also, you will gain access to all of the bonus interviews that I do. You'll gain early access to their releases. I'm just about to put up my interview with CC Getty, and he is the organizer, or one of the organizers, for the 420 Music and Arts Festival here in Calgary, and that is taking place at Distortion April 19th, 20th, and 21st. So yeah, if you would like to support the show, please visit our Patreon page. It means a lot to me. If you are fans of the show, consider signing up for our email list. It'll keep you up to date with all of the podcasts, anything that's going on with the website, and you also automatically be entered into any draws that we do for prizes and stuff. We usually do one on about a monthly basis. Prizes include CDs, t-shirts, stickers, stuff like that. So visit fsproductions.ca if you would like to sign up for the email list. It's literally the first thing you're going to see when you visit the website. It's really easy. You just put your email in, hit sign up, and bam. It takes maybe 2 minutes. But while you are at fsproductions.ca, check out some of the other cool stuff that we put up there. We have blog posts and articles, and also that's where all the podcasts get posted. So yeah, fsproductions.ca. Check it out. It would mean a lot to me. It actually just means a lot to me that you are all listening, so thank you. On this episode of Groove Talk, I am joined by Matt Berry. Matt Berry is the music coordinator for X92.9. He also hosts the Alt 20 Countdown, and he hosts Xposure on Sunday nights. If you are a band in the city, or if you have lived in Calgary for a while now, I'm sure you're familiar with X92.9, and you might be familiar with Matt Berry. This was a really awesome conversation. It was probably one of my favorite episodes of Groove Talk to do. I got to go to the X Studios to meet with Matt, and we just sat down and had a really awesome conversation. I got to find out all about how like radio works, how songs get played on the radio. Yeah, it was a really cool conversation. I'm gonna stop talking about it and I'll just let you listen to it. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Matt Berry. Thank you very much for listening and enjoy your day.
This is Groove Talk with FrogE Style.
Welcome to another episode of Groove Talk, everybody. On this week's episode, I am joined by Matt Berry.
Hi.
And he is the music director and host of Xposure.
Yep. I also host the Alt 20 Countdown.
And the Alt 20 Countdown at X92.9, which I'm sure doesn't need any introduction, but it might. Maybe some people are listening from different cities. But it's a
if they are, we do have an X in Red Deer now.
Oh,
we just
really?
launched X 100.7 in Red Deer.
Oh, wow.
So Xposure runs there and the Alt 20 runs there.
Oh, awesome.
If you do have Red Deer fans.
It's possible. I think there's like maybe two people who listen from like Russia. So.
Perfect.
This probably means nothing to them, but whatever. So I guess, why don't you kind of tell us like what your job sort of entails?
Okay, so the music director aspect of it, essentially I'm in charge of like scheduling all of the music that we have on the air. So when I took over this job, what we did was we actually changed up a bit of what we call the imaging on the station. It's the splitters, like the stuff that plays in between the music and that kind of vibe of things. So I went off the air full time and became music director full time. And so a big part of my job is really just crafting the playlist that we have. So we have, like our massive selection of songs, and my job is to essentially, filter out what will sound good in the music mix, I guess, know. So there's like the day-to-day operation, which is going through every single hour of every single day and making sure that certain songs are playing where we need them to, and this imaging that I was talking about, like we run stuff that's like cold over song intros and things like that. So my job is kind of just making sure that ultimately the product of X99 sounds good music wise. And then another aspect of it is kind of like, it's like the boring things, but extremely necessary, is like we go over music logs. So we have to reconcile and make sure that, like on the back end, after everything's played on the air, it's my job to go through and make sure that every song that says it played, every song that got dropped, like that didn't play due to time or whatever, like every hour we have our listener-driven radio, or X on demand that we call it, where one of those songs gets booted out. So my job is to just make sure that everything on our paper log matches everything that's on our computer. And a big part of that is to make sure we have our CanCon, which is 40%. And almost every station in the country has 40%, unless they're an older station, which are usually about 35%. And then some of the specialty stations might have a little bit different room, but for the most part, it's 40 for most stations.
Okay.
Ours is at least. So that's the important thing. And so that's kind of that's a big chunk of the job that's really important as well. That plays into our SOCAN reporting, which a lot of the bands listening know, like they get money from that. Like if they get their songs, there's a lot of like grants you can apply for with like SOCAN and Factor and those sorts of things.
Okay.
And so at the end of every month, I send out a SOCAN report, which is why I have to make sure that everything that's on my computer says it played. And then that's like basically day-to-day kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Every week we do our music meeting, which is where I bring in a lot of the like new music that's either like it's big ones that are like songs that are trending, things that are being brought in by labels, stuff that I found that's like, oh, this is cool, and I think this can fit the vibe of X92.9. And so what we do is we actually have like a group of it's 6 of us currently, about to be 7, and we just listen to a bunch of the songs. So sometimes there's 5, and sometimes there's sometimes we have close to like 8 or 10. Although I try not to bring that many in because there's like literally hundreds of songs that are released a week, you know?
Yeah.
So it's my job to go through, like cut through all the things that have been released and find out like what's best for X92.9. Because there's a lot of songs where it's like, yeah, this is a good song, but this doesn't fit with the radio station, or a lot of the songs like maybe aren't out this caliber yet to be played on mainstream radio in a regular rotation kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so then what we do is we kind of discuss. We, sometimes if it's, down to it, like a lot of the times it's pretty simple to figure out. It's like, cool, these are easily the best 3 songs we heard this week. And other times some of us argue about, not like argue, yell about it, but we'll be like, I actually think this song's stronger, and here's my reasons why. And someone else might, like pitch their point as to why we should add another song or whatever. But then those songs usually, for the most part, become our fresh cuts for the week, and then we see how those sound on the air, and then the following week or 2 weeks later, then we'll kind of debate at that point once again what will sound great being added to the radio station, because there's sometimes songs that we listen to that sound completely different in this room than they sound listening to your computer, and then ultimately how they sound on the air.
Yeah.
Because there's some songs where it's kind of like you hear it in here and you're like, I don't know if that's really for radio, and then you hear it on the air and you're like, never mind, like that sounds cool. That sounds really good.
Cool.
And yeah, so that's a brief rundown of that job. And then Xposure is its own animal, where I every week I curate a different playlist, which is normally based on bands that are playing, in usually Calgary and Red Deer, and a lot of bands that are either releasing new music that week and ones that have kind of some cool going on that week. And I try to stay as local as possible, but I still want to give some love to like the bands there's a lot of bands that send me music from the East Coast, from Vancouver, like, because Vancouver has a couple alt rock stations, but they don't have a thing like Xposure there. And same thing with a lot of bands out of Toronto and stuff. So I try to normally if there's like a point where it's like, oh, like this show's going on, but I also have this band from, Montreal that sent me music, that we usually get like punted for the local stuff as often as possible.
Okay.
But ultimately it's about still like curating a playlist. So it's like, well, what is the best hour of music I can create that is mostly new stuff, ideally, that is interesting stories with the bands, and ultimately like the mix of it being good. Like, because there's certain times where I get songs where it's like, this is a hard rock song, and a good chunk of the show this week is kind of like indie folk rock, and it's a lot of like synth pop or kind of just things maybe they're a little more mellow, where it's like, so this hard rock act is gonna stand out like a sore thumb in the middle of all these other acts.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then I get bands to send me their music. Bands can do that. Matt at harvardbroadcasting.com. They can email me their music. And we play, I don't want to say like we play, it's not like we play anything. Like if it fits under the alt umbrella, then odds are you have a good chance of getting like a spin that week, or getting your stuff showcased as well. It needs to be produced.
Yeah.
Like, because we get a lot of stuff where it's like, this could be a really good song, but it's like, but you recorded on your iPhone.
Yeah.
Which isn't terrible recorded. It's definitely advanced since I've started the gig.
Yeah.
But you get a lot of songs where it's like this, like this sounds like it was in your mom's basement on the iPhone. Like, we need a little bit of production value still because it is the radio, and there are a lot of bands who are vying to get onto that spot that I've 14 spots every week, give or take.
Yeah.
So it's like there's a lot of bands that are looking for that stuff, and there's a lot of bands that are playing gigs, a lot of bands that have new albums, and so we have to find the best sounding stuff as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's that in a nutshell, I suppose.
Awesome. So the Xposure is like 100% you then? There's no like outside intervention in that or anything like that? And
Yeah, so I come up with the playlist every week. My boss hasn't really given me any sort of flack about any of the bands. He's never said like, oh, well, you need to play more of this or less of this. Basically, the only thing that I've been told about it when I took over the job a few years ago was that we want to put more local or make local like the forefront of it while still playing some of these smaller bands. And so the idea was that there was less kind of like rare acts from bigger bands.
yeah.
Which would sometimes get played before. And so it was just more so just making it just more focused on the legitimate indie bands. And there's some that like, are, I guess like some people like have questioned it where they're like, well, that's not really indie. Like it's like there's ones like Current Swell or like Always, the Beaches are signed to like Universal. But the idea is that it's like, well, these bands for the most part aren't getting mainstream radio play.
Yeah.
A lot of them not really through Canada and not really on X92.9. Like Always are one of these acts that's like they are this like perfect example of like a big exposure act because they're one of these ones that's like yeah, they're critically acclaimed and they always have like people praising them and being like, wow, this band's amazing. Like everybody should be on top of it. Rolling Stone writes about them and Pitchfork and NME. And then it's like, yeah, they're a great band, but they're not necessarily a radio band. They're not a mainstream radio band. And there's a lot of acts like that. And so those are kind of what I aim for as well, are some of these acts where it's like, it's something that you may be interested in that maybe you've never heard of. Like there's a lot of people who are super music nerds or whatever who are like, well, of course I've heard of this band. And you're like, yeah, but your average radio person, the person who's cruising around on a Sunday night, maybe hasn't heard of these acts that we don't play as often. Yeah. And so that could be your new favorite band. And particularly I'd like that to happen with the local acts and say like, this band's playing on Friday night. Go see them. Like people always complain about bands not playing here in Calgary, but you have numerous bands playing every single night of the week. Something you can go check out. But I've never actually had my boss tell me like what was that? Like, why are you playing this song? And there's been a couple times where I've played certain stuff where I'm like, ooh, like that's a little like that's pretty heavy, or that's pretty pop. Like, I expect to like get a message and be like what was that? And not in a good way of like what was that? I was like, what is this? But my boss Christian, he's he's very open to the idea that it's like this is what Xposure is supposed to be. It's this hour that is a little bit off kilter. It's an hour that is where we are supporting these bands that don't necessarily either work on radio or aren't quite at that point where it's like if we have 10 spots to fill as new Canadian music, it's like it sucks like to always like tell bands that, but it's like we got New July Talk, we got the Elwins, Arkells, Rural Alberta Advantage, Death from Above. So it's like when all of these bands are pumping out all this amazing music, it's like the songs they're putting out are good, but they're not at that point yet, and they're also not familiar enough.
Yeah.
Which is difficult. And I hate having that discussion with bands because it's like you want to. It's like the song's good. It's like, but it's not quite there yet. You know, It's like there's either like a hook or it is a production value, as we talked about, or it's sometimes it's just like we get songs sometimes where it's like, is this too indie? Like, is this like, it's just like, it sounds like it's indie music, and you're like, yeah, that's what it is, and it's not meant to be mainstream, and that's also kind of the cachet of it, that's what's cool about it, is that it isn't it's mainstream stuff,
Yeah, no, totally. And like at the end of the day, like a certain amount of your listeners, I'm sure, are gonna want to hear those, new hits from the big bands, right? Like that's why they're listening to the radio and stuff.
Yeah.
I remember the first time that you guys played Current Swell though on the radio. I was so excited.
Yeah. And they're awesome. Like they're so good.
Yeah. But yeah, I could see they're not like a radio band.
Yeah, like they have this like appeal, but it's like there's certain songs where it's like, this could potentially work, but then they're almost in this list where it's like we have 10 spots to fill and they're number like 11 or 12, right?
Yeah.
Like you're just always like kind of shy of that. Which is unfortunate. It's kind of just just the way the industry works. I mean, I think it's one of those things where it's like we want to give like those smaller bands across the board. Not even like obviously Canadian. We want to support the most, because it's where we're from, the hometown bands and stuff. But there's even like some of the smaller international acts. We're like, this is like a cool song, but it doesn't have that like that bigger appeal. It's like we're not trying to like curate to everybody, but ultimately it's like radio's still a business, we still need to find stuff that is accessible. We need to play stuff that is ultimately something that like ideally every person who's a fan of alt can kind of get behind. This may not be your favorite band, but you're like, well, this isn't garbage kind of thing, right? So
yeah, cool. So how long have you worked at the radio station then?
I've worked at X now for about almost 9.5 years, 10 years as of December.
Oh, wow.
Of 2018. So I've been in radio itself for almost 11, I guess, in total. Yeah. So I've been here for a while. I'm definitely the most senior person on air at the station. And then I'm one of the. I'm not an original. I wasn't one of the original hires, but I'm one of the oldest. I'm not one of the oldest people here. I'm younger compared to a lot of the people in one sense. But then there's like our bosses and stuff that have been here since the beginning, and then I kind of came in about a year and a bit after the launch. So.
And is this the only radio station you've worked at, or?
No. I worked at my practicum was at a station called Big Earl, which no longer exists. It's in Edmonton, or it was called Capital FM now, and it was like a country station. It was like an older country station. Although it wasn't older, it was like, but it played like. It was like very just like it's Big Earl, like that was like their whole thing. So it didn't last very long. But my job there was to clean up dog crap. So it was my literal first job in radio was cleaning up dog crap. And so they had this promotion where it's like we'll do anything to like get you to listen to this radio station, like even clean up your dog crap from the backyard. So I was hired on. My nickname was Skittles at the time because I had very colorful hair. I had like pink and blue hair at the time, which also doesn't fit the country format. And then my buddy Trevor, we were both hired on. I can't remember what his nickname was at the time, but I remember like the morning show gave him something because he was like some kind of like morning show intern at the time. And that was our first job. And then as soon as my practicum was done, I messaged a station that was The Bounce, 91.7 The Bounce, now Kiss FM, in Edmonton as well. And so I messaged them about being a board operator, which is just like the person who's, at the radio station when people are out on remotes or doing a live show or whatever. And so I started doing that and did like live Friday nights from like a club down the street. And then I would do like the Saturday night, and I kept pestering my boss to do on air. I was like, can I do a shift like after I'm done opping? Like, can I do something like do an overnight, like anything? I just wanted to like even just do it for free. Like I wasn't expecting to get paid. Yeah. And so he ended up, what ended up happening was he needed someone to work New Year's Eve. And what's funny is I would have, if he had just asked me right away, I would have just done it. But I think he wanted to give me the night off, like, because I worked every Friday and Saturday night.
Yeah.
So I think he wanted to give me the night off, like, because it was New Year's Eve. I've never asked him about that mentality, actually, but I guess he tried to find like a bunch of different people, and of course everyone else was busy on New Year's Eve. So he gives me a call. He's like, "Hey, like I wanted to talk to you," or maybe he came into the room or whatever it was. But he's like, "I want to talk to you." He's like, "Are you able to work? Are you able to work New Year's Eve?" He's like, "If you're able to, like what I'd be open for is like if you want to do that, and then you want to do a live show afterwards. After like you do that the New Year's Eve party or whatever it was, or maybe it was. I'm trying to think if I did a night, where if I was live after the New Year's Eve party, or if I got to do a live on air shift later. But regardless, it was because of that. Yeah, because he was like, if you work the shift, like I'll be open to letting you do like on air stuff, and then we can give you like." They'll give you air checks, and then like if that sounds good, like we'll let you just kind of keep doing it. And he's like, and I'll also threw in like $100 for like Hudson's or something like that. So not only did I get paid like time and a half for the shift, but then I got like my goal of finally being on the air, and I got $100 at Hudson's.
Nice.
And this was at a time. This is before the drink rules came in. So like $100 at Hudson's on like industry night, where they would have like it was like just ridiculously cheap drinks. So it's like you show up with like the $100 and it's like it's a party for everybody, which was great. And then I got to be on air, and yeah. So then I just kept at that, and then what I started doing actually was I worked at when I first started at the Bounce, I worked bending rebar as well. And actually, I've been bending rebar since I graduated, which is where I heard about my radio school. But then I quit that so I could focus on doing the overnights and stuff at work. So then what I'd do is like I'd work at Starbucks a couple days during the week, and then I would also work at the Bounce doing like the opping shifts and then doing overnights. So I would do midnight till 5 a.m. So I would do like the midnight request fest that we had on weeknights. So I'd do it from time to time. Like I'd usually do it from like. Sometimes I do on like I usually try to do like a Wednesday or like Wednesday or Thursday night, because it's like Monday and Tuesday like people aren't up that late, but Wednesday and Thursday was like the industry nights and things like that. So there's at least people up listening to the radio, and then I started doing it on weekends. So my shifts eventually became like the weekend, especially was I would do a Friday night opping shift from 9 p.m. till 11 a.m. And then I'd be on the air from it was from like 9 p.m. till 2 a.m. And then I'd be on the air from 2 a.m. till about like 5 or 6. And then I'd usually sleep at the station, because then I had to op the next day in the morning from 9 a.m. till 2 p.m. And then I would work at Starbucks from 2 until like 8 or whatever. And then I would go back and op from 9 p.m. till 1 a.m., sleep for 2 hours, and then I'd be on the air from 3 a.m. till 7 a.m. Every weekend. Like I just started doing that as my weekend thing, and then people just started to get to know me as like oh, you're that guy that's on at 4 o'clock in the morning when like no one else has anybody on the radio. So they'd call in, and it was actually pretty fun. It was great, because it was like the after bar crowd who would always listen to those shows, and then I just applied for the job here. I actually sent Christian Hall an email. I've sent him. I applied for the job. I applied for gigs here, but I think 3 or 4 times. I think the 4th time that I did it was the time that I got the job. And what was funny is I came down here for my interview. It was a weird kind of timing for everything, because actually the same day I sent in my demo for X, for the job that I ended up getting, was the same day that our evening announcer at the Bounce was let go, which would have opened up the late night position that I would have been qualified for.
Okay.
So it would have been like this shift that was like 10 p.m. till 2 a.m. So much better than the 2 a.m. till 5 that I was doing on the weekends.
Yeah.
And so it's like that kind of all happened at the same time. And when I came down to Calgary for my interview, so I interviewed in person, and it was the same day that I came down here for my interview. It was the same day that my boss was like, hey, like, how about you do the 10 p.m. shift tonight after the New Kids on the Block concert? It's like, so you can do like 10 p.m. till 2 a.m. or whatever. I was like, okay, great. I remember coming back from here, like after the interview, it was just like, it's like, cool, like, I'll see you guys later. I'm gonna do like a New Kids on the Block after party thing, like, so hopefully you hire me and like save me from this. And so I went and did that show that night, and it was fun, you know, like it was top 40. Top 40 is I think it can't, like, a lot of people think it's just like, it's like, oh, we're just talking about this pop music and stuff, but I think if you have a brand that lets you be fun, then it is fun. You're not just, you know, you're not just saying like it's Justin Timberlake on, you know, I don't know, I won't say anything about the stations, but there's a lot of critique of a top 40 format where it's very just like, let's just go, and people aren't allowed to showcase a personality. So we were at that station at the time. But then I ended up getting the job here, and I took it because it was like a dream station to work at. As soon as I heard the station, we came down for a Warped Tour in like 2007, I think it was, the summer before I applied for this job. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, man, like I want to work at this station. Like that sounds like such a cool station. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had listened to them like online after I saw them, like, and like listened to it when we were down here in Calgary. So then, I streamed it all the time, and I'd always keep an eye out for the jobs. So whenever something opened up, I would apply for stuff. And most of the jobs, I think 3 jobs opened up. One was a Saturday night announcer, which they didn't end up hiring at all. And then another one was an evening announcer, which went, I believe that's when Greg Beharrell got the job, which is, you know, phenomenal choice. So, like, obviously I didn't get that. And then there was another one that was the midday position, which I knew I wasn't qualified for at all. And Carly Myers got that. And then shortly after, like, a big shakeup happened with the lineup, and then they opened up a overnight and weekend positions. Like, yes, this is me. Finally, this is my shot. And then I got hired, and
Nice.
I've been here since. So it's a long-winded way to get there. So
So have you always wanted to do radio then, or?
No. My original idea of what I wanted to do was film. Like, when I graduated, I wanted to do either, like, I like the idea of like directing, but I like the idea of like working on like a screenplay or something along those lines, like something to do with film. And so my original plan when I graduated was to bend rebar, and I made like kind of a rough plan of like okay, like, well, if I make this a year and I put this much away, I can pay for school in 2 years outright, or damn near kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because I was living with a buddy for cheap, and we were making like pretty good money at the time. It was during the boom in Edmonton, so there was like some decent money to be made at the time. So I was like, okay, well, I'll work for 2 years, and then I'll do this, and then I was one of the things. And it's funny because Mark Michaels, who does afternoons here now, he used to be on Virgin Radio as well. We were talking about it, and we actually have like a similar thing. Not to tell his story as well, but it was like we would always listen to the radio in this warehouse. So when I was bending rebar, it's like all we do for like 12 hours a day is in Edmonton. We would have it on the Bear, or we'd listen to K97, or we'd listen to Sonic, and we just listened to these stations. Usually it was the Bear. Like every guy in this, for the most part, would listen to the Bear, and then during break we'd talk about these things, and that's kind of where I started thinking about. It's like, oh, like these guys are like funny, and like, you know, you are allowed to be opinionated on the radio, and you can, you know, it just seems like such a fun job. And I heard this ad for this school, and it was just like, are you tired of this job that's like, you know, this dead end job that you hate or whatever? It's like, do you want to be creative and fun? I was like, yeah, I do. I do want that. Not that the bending rebar was terrible, But it was like, you don't want to be one of those guys. Like, I know some of the guys that were working there were like, oh yeah, I expected to work here for 2 years. And then it's like, and now look at me, I'm 50. Yeah. Or even some of the guys that were older than me who were probably, I'd say like they were 25 and I'm 17. And they did the same thing where they started working there after high school with the intention of just working there for a little bit, making some money. But then they, like, one of the guys had a house now, and another guy had like a really nice car. And they have all this money where it's like, well, if you quit this job, you can't have that house and that nice car anymore if you're going back to school. Yeah. And I was like, I don't want to be that guy because like this isn't my dream job, Yeah. So I was just like, let's see what this radio thing is all about. And then as soon as I started doing it, I just fell in love with it. I just always like, once I started doing it, listening to it more. My goal actually was to do, still is to do like programming. Like I want to program a station. But a goal of mine for a long time has been to do music director. So I got that now. Yeah. So, especially here at X, which is huge. So yeah, that was the original intention.
Neat. I kind of actually stumbled into podcasting in a similar way. I work a job and I can listen to podcasts all day. Right. And then I do that and I'm like, oh, wow, it's cool. You can just sit down and you have a conversation with somebody and you record that and awesome. And then I was like, oh, wow, I have all this gear. So, why not just start my own podcast?
Yeah. Yeah. Why not do it, man? There's so many people out there who are making, not even necessarily making money, but there's people who it's like their job. They decided one day, they're like, I'm gonna podcast. That's gonna be my gig, There's people who make that money, and that's their job, or that's like, even if it's not like your sole source of income. There's these people who it's like that's what they do now. They're YouTubers, and you're like, man, why didn't I you're almost like at that. We're in this weird. How old are you?
27.
Okay, so I'm 29, and I feel we're in this sort of age where it's like we were in that weird cusp where it's like you decided like a little bit later where it's like, oh, I could do podcasting. Whereas like my nephew now is growing up and he's like, it's like, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? I don't know, I want to be a podcaster or a YouTube star. And you're like, that wasn't even in high school. You never thought like, oh, I'm gonna YouTube for a living.
Yeah, exactly. It was like such a new thing at that point.
Yeah.
And it still is really new, but it's like...
I don't think people have quite tapped what the potential is for it creatively and like financially. I think there's a lot more ways that a lot more people can kind of tap into the value of YouTube and podcasting especially, I think has like a big... They'll have like a big boom, and people are worried about it, or they say that about radio, where they're like, "Are you worried that like podcasting is going to take you over?" It's like, no, it's a completely different elements,
No, exactly.
It's its own separate thing. So,
and like the thing is most people still at least listen to the radio in their car because it still comes in every single car for a reason,
Yeah, and you still get an app, and you still get like it's still local. Yeah. Ultimately, it's still a connection with people as opposed to like a Spotify playlist or anything like that, which like there's value in the playlists and people streaming and all those sorts of things, but I think radio like just has like there's just this personal connection I think you have with like personalities and just with the idea that it's like this is my city's radio station, this is my station. People feel I feel at least like, and I guess research shows, people have this personal connection with a radio station as opposed to like no one listens to a Spotify playlist and goes like, yeah, that's my blogged 50, unless it's your blog, unless you created those songs, like no one has that mentality, right?
Yeah. And I mean, that's the reason I still listen to the radio. Like I have all the opportunities in my car to not listen to the radio, I have an aux cord and all that. But I still enjoy listening to the radio in the morning because it gives you all that. It gives you that feel, that connection. Maybe you'll laugh in the morning because of the hosts or whatever, and it's just like, it gives you that personal connection. And you're gonna hear some sweet music as well. So new shit that maybe you wouldn't listen to on your own as well. So.
Yeah, and that maybe wouldn't necessarily, I guess, be discovered in your play, like just because. it's that same mentality where it's like, like I said, like there's hundreds of songs that get released a day, and now all of them are on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. So, I mean, what I love about what we do here, and I think in radio in general, is that I think like ultimately it's like, yeah, you can have like your favorite Spotify playlist, but like how often do you listen to the song? It's like, oh, every single one of these is my favorite song, like of a random playlist like that. Whereas I think the beauty of radio and like what we do, like I guess like let's say at X for alt fans, it's like yeah, you might have these other bands like you're like that you're into, or that like that is your favorite band, or that you think we should play or whatever. But ultimately, it's like this is still a curated playlist of all of the best songs spanning the last like 30 years of alt music.
Yeah.
You know, and there's some stuff that maybe you're not crazy about, but if you listen to the station, odds are you like 90% of what we play.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of those songs are like, yes, like whether it's older like the Nirvanas and like Pearl Jams, or like you love the Killers, or you know the new stuff like Amy Shark or whatever. It's like that, you know, the playlist is curated for this fan base, you know, like I'm a 29-year-old, like I'm within that demographic of these alt fans who are like love like hearing the old stuff, but are always wanting to discover something new.
Yeah.
And our listeners are very open, I find, to like they'll let us know like if we're playing something and they don't like it. They are very open to being like, nah, I don't want that. But we don't have this thing where it's like people will play something that people don't like, and then they're like, I'm done with this station forever. It's like people are like, yeah, I wasn't a big fan of that. Like my Christian, he always has like, where it's just like it's like a meal, you know, where it's like, oh, like you have like you know, like here's this like shit sandwich, and you're like, I didn't particularly like that, but I will take a gander at what you have on the rest of your menu, and I enjoy everything else you have. Just this particular shit sandwich I wasn't a fan of, but you know, I'll come in tomorrow and perhaps you'll have a new special of the day, and it might be another shit sandwich, or it might be my next favorite meal.
Yeah.
You know? So that's the beauty of I think what we do here, especially, is that you always have these, you know, this opportunity to discover your new favorite band. You know?
For sure. The amount of people that I've heard, you know, it's like, oh, where did you hear from this band? Oh, they played it on X92.9, and then I went and I looked them up, and their entire album is really good, and you know, the amount of people that tell you that is just like, it's unreal.
Yeah, it's why radio still exists.
Yeah.
You know? Like, people think, like, they said television was going to kill radio, and they said, you know, like, Sirius Satellite, and they said podcast, and all these things. It's like, no, because radio is it's its own thing. It's its own animal, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. So, how do, like, some of those older songs then make it on the rotation?
So part of it is the idea that is based on, I guess, like in our rotation of things, we have a gold category is what it's called, and a lot of that is where those songs that are. I mean, we have ones that like span from the Nirvana to the, you know, Killers and Modest Mouse, and then there's like some newer stuff in there, or like new-ish stuff like Kaleo that's in there, and like, let's say Modest Mouse, Lampshades on Fire is in there, as well as like Float On and Dashboard.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the older songs are kind of existent within the playlists, partly because like ultimately like Smells Like Teen Spirit and Creep and you know, like just I guess like a lot of the stuff from like the 90s, like those songs are like, those are great songs.
Yeah. Still
exist because like ultimately that's like Smells Like Teen Spirit is still like, you know, I'm sure it's still charting somewhere, you know?
Yeah.
Like there's still people who are buying it, and there's still these new generations that are like, oh, I've never heard this song before, you know?
Yeah.
So these songs still exist in the playlist because we are ultimately like we're alternative station and we are modern rock, but it's this idea of still like, you know, you can still honor the past, but like we don't have to be like tied down by it. But you have these songs that are just ultimately just great songs. You know, they're timeless. You know, like they're these songs that's like, you know, even if alt kind of gets like a lot of people find that alt's getting like that's getting poppier or that it's getting too folk rocky or whatever. But it's like ultimately those great songs are still great songs. You know, if Smells Like Teen Spirit 1979 from Smashing Pumpkins were released today, it's like those would, like if Nirvana came out now, people would be like, that's the return of rock.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
You know, it might have a different vibe. You know, it's kind of hard to tell like when you have those bands that come out, but ultimately it's like those songs are still good, which is why they still survive in the playlist. But what's interesting is that it's like you almost have this like transition, I guess, like and we talk about this all the time whenever we get people who talk about like where alt is now, because we used to have, you know, back in the 80s, it's like it was a lot of like Joy Division and The Cure and acts like that were you know, in your REM, where it's these bands where it's like that's what alt was in like the late 80s, and it was very, you know, it was like this like pretty soft, like kind of like completely different than what grunge was.
Yeah.
And so you have this like cycle where it's like, you know, we had this like kind of I don't know the best way to describe it, but you know, it's kind of like that synth 80s, you know, progressive rock or whatever you want to call those bands. And then like grunge came and grunge was like, it was like the return of, you know, these like hard hitting bands and there was a lot of you know, just like loud guitars and like some of these songs are longer that are like or sorry, not longer, sorry, these shorter like punchier kind of like punk songs in a sense, right? So it's like then you had grunge, you need Green Day come back, and like that's what alt became. So then we had this point in the 90s and like I guess really like the core of the 90s was very grunge and very punk rock, and there was even like the new metal phases and all these sorts of things. And then like around the 2000s, you know, it's like you had like the bands like the Killers started coming out, and you had the Strokes, and you had you know, like kind of then like the mid 2000s, you had these bands that were, it's like now when you look at it, it's like, well, a lot of the bands now seem like they were influenced almost by those earlier 2000s bands, because it's like, well, we had some of that stuff that was kind of like a little electronic again, and a little bit like, you know, like Franz Ferdinand Take Me Out is like it's a dance track essentially, but with guitars.
Yeah.
And so I think everything's just kind of evolved from that. It's just gone cyclical back to like that same vibe almost of the 80s, where it's like, well, alt can be poppier and it can be softer and it can be weird. You know, there's some stuff that's like really off kilter that you'll hear stuff and you're like, there's some stuff that's out there, you're like, no, that's like that's not alternative, like that is a dance track. Like you're trying to pitch it as alternative, but it's not. But then there's some stuff that you hear and you're like yeah, there's something here. Like there's something within that sort of vibe, and it just continues to like just like evolve in a different way. Like we had even like, you know, the Mumford and Sons phase, you know, where it's like Mumford and Sons came out, and then it was like you had Lumineers and you had Monsters and Men and you had all these other sorts of acts that were just like folk rock kind of stuff, and people just ate it up. And so now you have once again those bands that are like, you know, these guys who like heard the first Mumford album, who, you know, are now creating bands, and they're like, well, I love that record, like, so I want to continue doing this, you know? Because like people don't seem to like guitars as much right now, you know? It's like, I hate to say it, we hate to say it at a rock station, but we'll have these songs, there's very few outside of the older timeless ones. There's times that we have a song here, we're like, oh, that's really good. I can guarantee you that our like the core fan base isn't gonna like it because it's too loud, you know. It's too, or it just and no longer sounds good on the air because it's so aggressive, compared to everything else. And you have a few that like Black Pistol Fire is like a new one that's like a rock song, or like Royal Blood seems to do pretty well, but it's still like it's pretty, like a lot of it's still pretty polarizing, like. one of my favorite comments though is because we do our music advisory panel, and one of my favorite comments was someone was like, because we had a question at the end, and we say like, well, what are the favorite songs that we're playing right now, or is there something that maybe we should be playing that you're really into? And so I read through these comments, and some of the acts like I'll check out, like, because some people, it's funny, they'll suggest like really old songs, like, I guess not really old, but it'll be ones where it's like, that's from like 2008. So like, why are like, you guys need to play this? Like, no one's heard of this band. Like, this is like it's like the perfect example of, it's like, this is your all-time favorite song, but like it's not like the mainstream radio stuff, you know?
Yeah.
But one of my favorite comments was someone who was like, oh, my two favorite bands right now are Amy Shark and Royal Blood. Like, these are literally the polar opposites of new music on the station right now, where you love like this soft romantic song called Adore, and then this other song that's like heavy, like just bass guitar or like it's bass and drum driven track where you're like, man, like, I want to meet you. Like, you're like, can we get you as the core fan base? Because like, you'll like everything on the station, you know?
Yeah. I think that like now more than ever, people have like way more of like an eclectic music taste. You know, you can have those people who like, you know, they like metal and they like really heavy metal, but then they'll also like, you know, pop punk or whatever it is, or stuff that plays on X92.9 or electronic music even. And I find now more than ever, people are like, you know what, anything but country music.
Yeah.
That should be its own genre, anything but country music.
Yeah. Like, there's so many people that will trash on country, and it's interesting because country is its own beast of radio and musicians, and how they do everything is incredible. But you're right, it is so like, if people hear like a bit of twang, like nah, not for me. Like, you know, start singing about your truck, and I don't want it. You know. Like,
yeah.
And there are some artists though that like, it's interesting because they're country artists, but they're not the typical country artists.
Yeah.
Where it's like you hear it and you're like, great, this is just a well-written song, which ultimately country music is, or was supposed to be, I guess, before it got like sort of the stereotype of you know, being about like your truck and your dog and your, you know, wife leaving you. But there's like, it's like ultimately it was just like these just songs that told a story in a sense, you know, like it's like you sang about your life and then it became this like cliche kind of thing where that's what you're singing about. People are like, I don't want it. I don't want any of that.
At least it's hard for people, you know, in cities maybe, because they're singing about stuff that you just like can't even relate to anymore. Like,
yeah, like I've never sat on a tractor.
Yeah,
you know. I don't have a pickup truck, so I don't know what you're expecting me to relate to.
Yeah. So maybe for like, you know, going back to Xposure, like what's some advice that you could maybe give to local bands that, you know, who are, you know, trying to get onto Xposure? Like, what's some advice you could give to them that would maybe up their chances?
Well, I think one would be to when you email me your stuff, is like, give me everything. Like, send the email, introduce who you are, and if you have like upcoming gigs or a new album, and then send a link to what you have, and not a Spotify link or an iTunes music link. Send me a link to like, you know, SoundCloud or Bandcamp. And in general, I guess while we're talking about these things, is a band who is currently recording music should have at least one song on Bandcamp or SoundCloud or something accessible by everyone, because that's ultimately where promoters are looking for you. Or if I'm looking for you for a show, or if someone wants to discover your band, you need to give them music to listen to. Yeah. Because there's people who are like, yeah, you can send this as a Spotify link, but I don't have Spotify. So I'm not going to listen to that song, because I'm not going to download Spotify to listen to the song so that you can have a fraction of an eighth of a penny. You know, like, because bands they're not making music, they're not making money on their music the same way anymore. So it's like, you don't need to be worried about someone hearing your song for free on Bandcamp, because the people who are supporting you will either buy the record online or they will buy it at a show, or ultimately they're going to come to that show and spend the 10 or 15 bucks to come see you.
Yeah.
So have stuff accessible for everyone online, music-wise. And then going back to what we talked about before is making sure that it's produced and that it's that's at least clean, like that's not full of swears. Like if you're sending me something that is littered with F-bombs, or something that is, if you're sending me something where it's like this, like you're sending me a song that's like a heavy metal song, it's like you need to like still send me stuff within the wheelhouse of alternative.
Yeah.
It's kind of that idea where it's like if you're listening to something, you're like, oh yeah, like we're a pretty aggressive punk rock band. It's like, well, like that's not really something we play. Like there's a thing of being like the indie and not mainstream, and being something where it's like this isn't even like no radio station's playing this because they can't. Like no one wants to hear someone shouting at them about the government for 2.5 minutes, which once again goes to the in the 90s people will love that. Now not so much. And then would also be, I guess, with these songs is kind of having it like, if your ultimate goal is like, it's like we gotta be something a little bit different and off kilter, and something that is like weird, and you want to have these 8-minute songs and stuff, it's like, well, that's fine, but then it's like, but you can't really expect that to also be radio friendly.
Yeah.
So it's like, if that's your kind of thing, that you want to be avant-garde and you want to like do like these noise rock kind of bands that are playing these like really long songs that are just things that are like you just experience the music, for like 8 minutes. It's like, that's great, but we can't play that on the radio. So if your ultimate goal is radio play, like as a band, because there's a lot of bands that are like, we don't want radio play, or we don't want that type of success, or not to say you're only successful if you get on the radio, but like there's bands where it's like we don't want to be a mainstream act, and then there's other ones who are like, we're trying to like make this happen, so what can we do? So this is for those people. Is the songs is like make sure it's kind of like it's something within like a like a 3-minute mark kind of song, because people's attention spans once again aren't all there. And if you're sending certain songs, like really think about what those tracks are, that like if you're aiming to be on radio, it's like, well, what's the hook in this song? Or what's the accessibility of this track? And like if you have 5 songs, like really listen to the songs and get the feedback from your friends even, and decide like, well, if I'm gonna go to radio with this, like what's the single as you would have on your record, what is that one that's like, gets people going live, it gets like everyone says this is like their favorite song on this record, because it's like that's your shot. Like if you're gonna be sending this out, because there's some bands who've been doing this for a while and they want to send stuff out to like radio trackers, and they want to send stuff out to like promoters to get on shows. It's like well, sometimes you only have that one shot to make that first impression. So ultimately, with not on that 5-track EP, there is a song that's stronger than the others, I'm sure. So it's like that's the song that you need to push forward with everything that you're doing promotion wise, as opposed to just sending a record and being like, like listen to any of this. It's like, no, like showcase your work, showcase like track number 3. This song I feel is our strongest track, and that's what you gotta kind of pitch. And then I guess and get on exposures is like I said is actually like, it's not extremely difficult, just as long as you're touring actively, or you have like a album, or not even touring, I guess, but playing local shows even, is just sending that out and letting me know, add me on Facebook and invite me to the things. Like I can't go to every show, but the invite will let me know they exist, so I can look ahead. Because part of what I do with Xposure is like when I'm programming the week, I look at like my invite list and look at like, oh well, what bands have sent out their shows, like which ones are promoting these shows and who else is on the bill. Like it's like set up those Facebook events and then invite everybody. Let them know it exists. Promote yourselves.
Yeah, for sure. Like even looking at like who I'm going to contact to maybe have on the podcast, I do a similar thing. I look and like see what bands are playing shows. Is anybody releasing new music? Like, do you look at their social media pages a lot just to see if they're active or?
Sometimes, yeah. Well, actually, no, sorry, not sometimes. I guess a lot of times. Like, there's certain ones where it's like there's certain acts that I see more often than others where it's like, oh, you guys are. I know what's up with you because either I have your band on Facebook already or I have members of your band, and so I'm aware of what they kind of have in store. But then there's some bands, well, I'll either try and find them and I can't find them on Facebook. So either the band, like the name's too obscure that like, or almost on the opposite end where it's like it's too common, where it's like the band's named Love, and you're like, well, how am I supposed to find that? Like, So I tried to find it. One of my biggest pet peeves, though, outside of a band not having any sort of music online or having any sort of social media presence, is when it's like you have a page but it hasn't been updated in like 3 years. Like, what are you doing? Or it's like, at least give me something. Give people something out there, especially when they have like a lot of fans and you're like, well, you clearly gained these fans a while ago and then you just stopped updating your Facebook, where it's like, it's not difficult to like put up what's going on with the show or take pictures in the studio or put the songs on YouTube and put the YouTube plays up or anything like that. Like I think the fans that get excited are the ones who like you're doing that Facebook page for. And then also when you have like promoters and stuff, I know some bands have emailed me or they've even sent out stuff like to fans or like to their friend groups, I guess. And they're like, are you guys able to like go like our band page? Because a lot of promoters will sometimes look and be like, oh, well, how many fans do you have as a thing? I'm not sure how many promoters actually do that. I'm not a promoter. I've just heard from, and maybe it's just a thing for likes on Facebook. I don't know. But they'll say like, can you at least go like the band page? Because then it just like, it showcases that you have that many more fans. And then when you are posting stuff online, you have that many more people that will see it. Mm-hmm. And if someone doesn't want to follow your band page or likes it and then doesn't want to get updates, you can unfollow. Yeah. You can either unfollow or you can block it or you can hide the feed or you can do all sorts of things. So I think it's like the band Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram, I think are all very important nowadays that so many bands don't utilize. And it shouldn't just be about necessarily promoting just when you have a show. Some bands will only do it when they have a show every 3 months. And it's like, that's great, but it's like, but then you did nothing for you posted nothing for me as a fan in 3 months. So in that time, it's like, share a song, like kind of make an update or I know a lot of pages where it's like, it's usually like, like the lead singer or whatever, who just like almost treats Japanese Girls is a perfect band that I'm thinking of. So Charlie will run like the Facebook and Twitter and stuff as if it's like his own personal account, which like it is. Like he's the guy behind that band. So when he's posting these things where he's like, damn, like, did you guys check out like the Oscars? Did you guys see hear this new Frank Ocean track or whatever? And it's like, it's not necessarily within that wheelhouse of that band, but it's like, it's just something interactive. Yeah. You're getting someone involved in something that's ultimately on your mind anyways. Like you're going to be posting that on your personal Facebook, so why not make that a priority with your band? Even if you think it doesn't relate to people, if they don't like it, then they'll go somewhere else, or like I said, like they'll unfollow you. But ultimately, your fans are like, "Cool, oh yeah, like we did see that. Like I saw this band win, best original score or whatever." And I feel people who are engaged on social media will then be engaged a little bit more with your band. The big bands do it too. There's so many acts that do it. So like, just because you're not the Lumineers doesn't mean that you can't. Like, you should be hustling more. You should be hustling more than these bands. You should be posting this stuff more.
You need to get your name out there more, right?
Yeah.
And like, even with Instagram now, if you just want to use one, you use Instagram, you can connect it to your Facebook and your Twitter. And if you're just even posting pictures, it like at least lets people know that that you care about them, maybe even, or like,
Yeah, and engage with other people's accounts as well.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
put up stuff. Like if people comment, if people message you, message them back, or someone comments on like, I love this song or whatever. It'll be like, cool, like we'll play it live for you next time. You know, there's just so many little things you can do to just engage a little bit more.
Yeah.
You know, you're a brand ultimately. You
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
You're not a band, you're a brand now, and it's wildly important that you own that. You know, like it's not necessarily where the biggest bands on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram are going to become, you know, the biggest bands out there, but it's like you're at least creating a fan base and a core fan base. That ultimately, like the guys, 21 Pilots, like they had like the best kind of, I'm not quoting them exactly, but the idea that they had, they're like, well, we wanted to create this kind of like grassroots kind of movement with our band and create this core fan base. And then if we got radio success, great, but we're not going to be radio success forever. So ultimately, when, you know, it's like if we come out with this next album, it's, you know, maybe it's not for radio, we still have that fan base that loves this band for who they are, and not just the couple of hits, you know. So they want to create this fan base that will essentially always be there, ideally always be there or grow with the band, and it's all based on a lot of just how they interact with fans. You know, it's how they do a bunch of stuff online that just makes people feel like part of the community.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, definitely. Like anytime any band answers a comment or something, you definitely get a little excited, you know?
I always hope when I tag a band in like on Twitter or Instagram or something, like I hope they at least like this. I hope they retweet it or whatever, you know? Like I hope that there's some acknowledgement, especially when it's a bigger act. Like if it's like and this is from someone who you know, interacts with like some bigger bands. So then imagine that 17-year-old kid who's like, like we'll call them out here, the Northern Coast is like their favorite band. And it's like so if like, you know, the guys from Northern Coast are like, cool, like we can't wait to like play this song for you at the show. It's like these people are like, this is amazing. Because the Northern Coast like their favorite band, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like for a lot of these people, like I know a ton of people who are like that, who are like they look at these local acts as these superstar rock star celebrities, and they're like, that is so cool. Like he sang to me. Like this, like they look like these kids. I guess I shouldn't say 17-year-old. I guess most bands play the bars. So I guess 18, 19, so you can actually see them live. But you know, they're like, wow, like they sang to me. Or like I caught his pick. Like it was so cool. Yeah. And it's like these people, like to these kids who go out to these shows, it's like, you know, you're Mick Jagger, you know, like you're the fans, like these these are the fans that like you guys have, so you need to treat them as such, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Do you ever get like starstruck at all when you meet bands now, or?
No, I've never. I get like, I think it's when we do like if we do like an interview or something. Like if I'm doing an interview, I get like nervous, and it's I wouldn't say it's not like a starstruck where it's like, oh my god, like, I can't believe this, like you're talking to me. But it's like it's part of this, I guess, like this this idea where it's like there's part of it where it's like, oh wow, like I can't believe like you're talking to me, like I can't believe like we get to sit down and we get to like just chat. Like I'm a big Blink-182 fan. Mm-hmm. I got to interview Mark and Tom like at X Fest a couple years ago, and you know, that was just like it was nerve-wracking in a sense. Well, a lot of in a sense, like a lot of it was all encompassingly nerve-wracking because it's like, man, like I don't want to make an idiot out of myself. Like, and also you have this mentality where it's like, well, I don't want these guys to be like, what if they're dicks? You know, like what if they were like what if I meet them and they were just like they're like arrogant, think they're better than me, or like think they're like too cool for school, because I was just like, well, then why are you even here? Like, why did you agree to this interview? But they weren't. They were awesome, and like when we just chatted, you know, and it was great. Like I got to, this is when like before like I think it was like just after Neighborhoods came out, and so like we got to like chat about the new album and chat about like the reunion, and it was great. And it was like all things that I wanted to know, and it was both so nerve-wracking because like this is like it was like my favorite band, you know, like I can't like it was like, well, who would you like on like a list of people? It's like, well, who would you want to chat with? It's like well, they would be up there, you know, like they would be like that band.
Yeah.
So I get nervous when I have to interview them, because it's like I don't want to partly sound stupid asking a question, and I also don't want them to be dicks or sound like they are like where it's just like after you leave and you're like, huh. not really a fan of them anymore, you know, like I'd never want that out of an interview. There was one band, I won't say who they are, I don't want to call them out, but there was a bigger band that like I loved. And we did this interview, and it was, part of it was like, I guess I was nervous, like the whole setup of it was kind of weird. But then it was like I was asking these questions that felt like they were like, it's like I had these questions that I thought were really good, and that I thought were like, they're a little bit away from like generic type of questions. And then like I worded it wrong, and like one of the guys like kind of like called me out on it, like as if I was like an idiot.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where it's like, you know what I meant. So like, why are you trying to like why are you treating as if like what I asked you was completely stupid, when you're kind of, I feel you should be aware of what I'm asking.
Yeah.
And then it was like, there was things where it's like they were kind of like just stiff arming a lot of the questions that I was asking. So then it was like, then it kept me from asking these other ones that I really wanted to ask. But I was like, I would hate to like ask you this question that I feel is like a little bit like more personal to me, and then have you stiff arm it, because I'm just like, I don't care enough about you to have you ruin the rest of this for me. You know, like I love the band, so it's like I don't want it to be even more ruined for me. So it's just like, great, see the guys tonight, and we'll end this now before I hate myself even more by the end of it. Yeah. So it's not really Star Trek. It's the never wanting to meet your heroes.
Yeah,
you know?
I was just about to say, it's kind of like the you never want to meet your heroes type thing.
Yeah. What's more rewarding, I find, is the opposite, is when people tell you, if you get told that someone's like a dick, and then they're not, and they're super nice and they're super open. And that I appreciate more, or it's someone or maybe someone who you expect, who I think might be a little bit more closed off, and then aren't.
Yeah,
it's like that's way more rewarding, where you're expecting like, oh, like I gotta, like we have a thing I feel, well, like we have it like in the industry. I find is that sometimes there's certain acts sometimes where you're like, you have to prep 2 interviews. You have to prep one where it's like, if you're going to be closed off, these are my generic, gotta kind of ask these questions. And then there's the like, here's the interview I really want to do type questions. And thankfully I've never really gotten a whole lot of the stiff arm ones outside of, there's been a couple where it's just kind of like, why are you even here?
Yeah.
But Josh Homme was the best one that I did, where a lot of people told me, they're like, oh yeah, like he's kind of a dick, like you gotta like watch out for it. And then I met him, and he was so nice. He was like he was like so open on questions, and he invited people in. Like, so they're like, what we did for takeovers is we usually let 10 people in the studio. And he was talking about, I forget the band. He was talking about one of these bands, and he was playing music like off his phone. And he was like, oh, like I don't have this act. He's like, I thought I had them on my iTunes, but I don't. And then one of the girls outside had this like entire band's discography on her phone. It was like her favorite band too. And she's like banging on the window, just like, I have it. And he's like, oh, like he's like, can we bring her in to like play it? I was like, yeah, like, why not? So he brings her in, and then he's like, why are all these other people outside listening to it? I'm like, oh, well, because we only have, like, we only allow 10 people in. And he's like, are they allowed in? I was like, if you want him to come in, like, bring him in. So then everybody from outside crowded into the studio. And it was great. And he was like, the only times, like, it wasn't even like a dick. It was like, it was funny. I get it if, like, maybe you don't have, like, a thick skin and you thought, like, he was being mean to you. But, like, I remember I was asking a question and I think, like, I stumbled on something. And then he's like, well, that last guy, like, some listener asked a question. He's like, well, that last guy asked this question way better than you did. He's like, you're fired, Matt Barry. He's like, get out of here. He's like, you take over. And it's like, and I just laughed about it. Whereas, like, someone might have thought, like, oh, like, Josh is firing me. I guess I'll leave. Kind of thing, right?
Yeah, it's more of a sense of they just, like, don't get his sense of humor, or, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, or maybe they might meet. I could see how he might come off that way to some people, but I think it just depends on your mood. It depends on how you take the sense of humor, and I guess ultimately how he is. But I think when he's around all these fans, it's like it's all just like you're on. I think, you know, it's just he wouldn't have invited all these people in to be a dick to people, you know, like he wouldn't be like, yeah, everybody come in, and then I'm gonna not answer any questions, you know, like why would you do that?
Yeah.
And then he gave people tickets to the show at the end of it. Like he stuck around. His like promo team was like we gotta go, like we have sound check at like 4:30 or whatever, and he's like, well, hold on. He took pictures with every single person who wanted pictures, and then he was like, if you don't have tickets to the show, write your name down on this list, and they'll send it over to us, and we'll make sure you're going to the show tonight.
Oh, wow.
So, like, you know, 20 people who didn't have tickets got tickets that night. Wow. And it was awesome. It was so nice of him. Yeah. It was great. Like, it was like I didn't expect any of it. It was just so fun, you know. Yeah. So
I guess then, like, he obviously realizes that, like, the reason you are making music, the reason you are successful is because of the fans.
Yeah.
Like,
and I think there's I think most bands get it, but there are some that sometimes you're just like, but this is the person buying your music, like seeing you at the show. Like I've never understood ego in an industry of, like, I understand, you know, I guess ultimately, I guess ego in the sense of, like, it's like you gotta, I think with some of these artists, you gotta think you're the shit to, you know, to be the shit, right? But you don't have to. There's a difference between being on stage and being like, you know, I'm a rock star. I'm out here to perform. I gotta have this confidence, a little bit of cockiness, and that's part of just like what makes like these rock stars. But then there's like this other part where it's like, but that doesn't mean you have to be a dick to people. You know, that doesn't mean like because everyone knows who you are, you don't have to not learn their name. You know, like
yeah.
Like, so I hate when I hear stories about that, though, when you hear about these people where you're just like, who are you? Especially when it's a nobody. Like when someone who has like one hit and they're dicks, and you're like no one's gonna care who you are in 3 months. Yeah, you know, like exactly. So why do you have to be like this?
Especially if you treat the people who do care about you now like shit.
Yeah. There's another band who I won't call out, but they had one like legitimate hit, and then like another song that we kind of played afterwards, and they came in for an interview, and they were just not nice people. And it was that same mentality where it's like they were young and they had like this big hit song, and they like, I think they just like they thought like they were like cooler than everybody. And it's like none of us have time for that. Like I don't have any time for any type of ego like that. It's like I wish I knew that, I guess maybe when I was younger. So then it's like, so I could have that mentality where it's like, if you don't want to be here, like just go.
Yeah.
You know, like you're not helping either of us by sticking around here when you don't want to be here to do an interview, you know.
Yeah, it's just gonna look bad on you, like.
yeah it's just like, this isn't fun for anybody, like just leave, you know, like.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to, it's 6:30 now, so
okay.
This is gone.
Right, sorry, I talk quite a bit. Who knew?
No, like I'm down to keep going there if you are, but if you have something to do, like.
No, I don't really have anything to go on, actually. I'll have to leave eventually, I suppose.
I do have a couple more questions.
Yeah, definitely.
So since you have been in the radio industry so long, like you said, about 10 years, how have you seen like kind of the music industry change, I guess?
Well, when I started, it was still very much like we were kind of in this weird point of, I think, where the music industry didn't quite know how to deal with the online stuff yet. So they didn't know, there was still like LimeWire, LimeWire was kind of like phasing out, I guess, at that time. And there was kind of this, like, I remember there was like this gap in between of like, there was like not embracing the internet while other bands were like trying to, like Radiohead was doing, like, they're like in Rainbows, like selling the album for whatever you want to pay kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there was this like this thing where it's like a lot of bands weren't on Facebook and Twitter and all those sorts of things. Like they had MySpace, but at that time MySpace was like, when I started in radio, I think MySpace was on its way out.
Yeah.
And then there were still bands who were hanging on to that, and it's like, but there's so many other elements in which you're using. And so there was still this kind of like weird kind of point of how bands marketed themselves. And now it's like the bigger acts are all over the place. Like, the bands are promoting themselves, as we were talking about telling local bands to do, even is be on every platform. And a lot of those bands are doing that. Now there's a lot more of that. There's a lot more of the embracing of it's like, let's put our music out there, and let's, like, people, like, bands can still sell albums or put their albums on Spotify and stuff, but they'll put out a lot of these songs like before the album even comes out. There's a lot of like promotion before the album's released of these albums, and then there's a lot of times where bands will put it out online for free, or you can have so much more access to the music. And now everything's promoted as the live show. Tickets are a little bit more expensive than they used to be. Mm-hmm. And a lot of, like, I think thought is put into how these bands are sounding on stage and how their stage presence is. And there's a lot of bands out there where it's like even if you're not a huge fan of their music, their live show is something you should shell out the money to go see because they're that good. And I think we're kind of coming into a little bit more of that, where bands are just, it's like, well, let's make this a performance. Let's make this a show that everybody wants to go see, because ultimately that's how bands are making the money now. And on an opposite end is merch, which has always been important for bands. But there's a lot of bands who are like, it's like, well, let's make something cool, or something a little bit like, I don't want to say gimmicky because that's the wrong word, but it's like 21 Pilots is another example. I use them because I feel they're so tapped into like the Gen Z. Like they excel, like the like red toques, and you, like, when they played X-Fest, you see all like the 21 Pilots fans like having all these like red toques, and they have like the like makeup all over themselves. Yeah. And I saw 21 Pilots play in Seattle as well, and it was the same thing. Like you could tell who like these major fans were, because they dressed like the band did, and like just like live performance wise, there was like a ton of people at that show who were like, I wasn't really stoked on that music, but once I saw them live, it's like I'll never miss them again. And just how they present themselves on stage and how they present themselves in interviews and photo ops and everything is so tapped into Gen Z, which is remarkable that they're able to do that in this generation that is ever changing, where you think like, oh, like I know what the kids are into. This is what it is. You're like, no, you're 3 months too late. Yeah. So I guess promotion wise and everything is that, and how bands, I guess how everything is accessed is a lot of internet based now, which I think is funny because we still get like, we got this band send us a demo, or not a demo, I guess it was like a single on a CD of a song that we've been playing for weeks. It was like, why did you waste the money? Like, and it's not on the band. It's not like the band's personally sending out, but it's like the label or whatever. Yeah. It's like, why did you spend the money on the envelope, the stamp, the CD, to put a single song on the CD, to send it to a radio station that clearly already has the song? Like, we've heard it. Like, you're late. You're late on it. So it's just kind of like, there's still this funny disconnect between what band, like, I guess I don't want to say bands. Like I say bands in the sense of I guess like a lot of the local bands, the indie bands who are promoting themselves.
Yeah.
There's like this weird thing where there's like some bands that are and some labels that are very into the digital format. Everything's promoting everything online, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that kind of stuff. And then there's these certain ones where it's like we get this. It's like I don't even have anything that can play a CD anymore, let alone like what am I supposed to do with this? Like when it's just the single that I already have that was sent to us through our radio service. Like we have like a service that's called DMDS that the bands like submit stuff to and labels submit their songs to. So it's just like we have it. Like, so why did you do this? So it's like this weird kind of thing where it's like they'll get it. Like, they'll get it eventually, but we're still there's still some people that are still caught in the old ways where like this is just how we've always done it. We've always sent out the single to radio through a CD. So on a promotion aspect, there's that. And then I guess musically in the last, since I've been doing radio, and particularly since I've been at X, how I found that the music industry's changed is a lot of, is what we kind of talked about before, with like the direction. Like X itself has evolved so much in the last 10 years. And it's not even X. I think every brand of radio for the most part, or I guess like, obviously, like I'm sure country's evolved in certain ways, but like a lot of country's country, and your soft ACs, you're still your soft ACs. They play the soft rock, play in the office spaces, but like with like the evolutions of like the X's and like even like your Virgin radios and stuff, it's like there were certain songs that were very it's like top 40 has gone from like when I worked at top 40, where it's like I worked there when like Lady Gaga was breaking, Katy Perry broke, Rihanna broke. It's like that was a huge time, and they were like all bangers. They were like this like fun, upbeat, like party jams that were all coming out. And now top 40's evolved almost in a similar sense that alt rock has, where it's like a lot of top 40 is very it's softer. It's a lot more ballads, a lot more stuff where it's just like this is down tempo.
Yeah.
It's very just chill. Like a lot of top 40 songs, and like they're kind of embracing a bit of hip hop, and even those songs that were kind of like, oh, this is just, it's not like I'm gonna get up and grind on the dance floor. This is it's romantic. I'm gonna let Drake serenade me and The Weeknd. It's like there's still like some upbeat parts to it, but it's very mellow compared to a decade ago. Yeah. And it's the same thing with alt rock, where it's like when X launched in 2007, it's like we launched with like Killing in the Name Of, and played a lot of Tool and Pearl Jam and Nirvana, and and Rise Against was like these big acts that were on the station that were very punk and very 90s influenced, and then like that kind of weaned out a bit, and X was still like this new rock station, like, and we were called like Calgary's new rock alternative for quite a few years. But then what started happening was alt was changing, and ultimately, we have to change with it. Like we can't be a new rock station, but still just play Rage and Tool and Nirvana, and not play, the Mumford Sons and Vance Joys of the world,
Yeah.
And so, with our format, it started changing, where like then you started these people are like, this, you guys call yourself new rock alternative, this isn't rock, and it kind of came to this head where our management team was like, you're right, like we're not like just a straight up like, well, like ultimately I still find that we're a rock station. I think we're ultimately alternative is still it's like we call ourselves like Calgary's alternative. A lot of stations will be branded as modern rock. I think it's like at the end of the day, we're still a rock station. We still like the idea of bands with guitars and stuff. There's still like a lot of White Stripes and Queens and Foo Fighters and those types of bands have a presence on the station. But then it was just like, you know what? We're not new anymore, and we're not a straight up rock station anymore. But we are still an alternative. And ultimately what happened with like kind of our branding change to Calgary's alternative was was just embracing that change. And a lot of stations did it around the same time, where they kind of went from like, well, we're not heavier anymore, and we're not like this like in your face as much type of station. It's like alt has changed pretty drastically, even in the like from the 2007 to like 2010, 2012, and all those sorts of, even when you look at the bands that came out, it all changed. And so then it was just kind of like changing that branding. So then it was like, well, Calgary's alternative is now like, we are like an alternative to like the, like CJ is still ultimately our main competition. Like they're an active rock station. They play a lot of like the biggest rock songs throughout history, and so it's like, well, we're still the alternative to like what, like the harder rock that CJ is now playing. We're the alternative to pops. Now we play like what would be dubbed as like alt pop, and stuff that would be, like alternative folk music and alternative, even alternative dance music in a sense. Like there was a point there was a point like a while ago where there was like, it was like Big Data was really big, and there was this band called like C2C. They were like this kind of like electronic kind of thing, and that was like a pretty prominent in the station as well. And now it almost seems like that kind of like trance dancey stuff is trending very much in the States. Like I find the US is like, there's a lot of songs we look at like what's trending, and a lot of it's like, it's almost dance driven. And so ultimately we just had to change up just how we branded ourselves. And since then, like it's like everyone else has kind of gotten on board. And there's some people where it's like, they're like, I don't really like the state of, alt music right now. And it's like, that's fair, but if you're aged out of that, it's like, it's unfortunately not for you anymore in a sense, right? Like it's ultimately, it's like, well, yeah, if you're not into, like Amy Shark and Mount Joy, and you're not into, Nathaniel Rateliff and the Night Sweats, it's like, well, that's where alt music is right now. And if you're looking for stuff to be like heavier and more in your face, like you gotta find something else, unfortunately. And it sucks, like in a sense, because it's like you don't ever want to lose a listener. You don't ever want to lose someone who is like, I loved you guys when you launched, and now I'm not a fan anymore. But you also, it's like, but that was 11 years ago. That was a long time. And it's one of those things where it's like, even if you look at a person, like if I met someone from high school who I'm like, you haven't changed a bit since high school, then that's depressing, isn't it?
That's just sad, exactly.
You're the same guy as you were in high school. Like if someone told that to me, I'd have to take a real hard look at my life and think like, Jesus Christ, like really? Like I knew who I was in high school. I like to think I'm quite a bit different. So it's just, you just evolve and it changes, and sometimes it doesn't change for everybody, or it doesn't get, I guess it doesn't get better for everybody, but alternative rock at this point in time is like the strongest it's been in years. It's the strongest it's been in the existence of this radio station, which is showcased across the U.S. I don't know if you follow radio in the U.S. a lot. I do, because I'm a nerd for radio. But there's so many stations they're like alt stations. They're popping up in like every single market. For the first time in 6 years, New York has an alt rock station.
Oh wow!
And they hadn't had one before. And LA has 2 rock stations, or alt rock stations. And there's a lot of stations that are going alternative, because the format's so strong right now. And I think it's back to what you said, where everybody has this vast taste in music now, where it's like you can tap into this what used to be a niche market. Like when we launched in 2007, it's like we're a niche station. Like we're here for these dudes who grew up with Nirvana and Rage Against the Machine. It was like my boss's demographic. He was like, well, I'm launching the station for guys like me. And now he was almost at that point where it's like, well, I can't, like he'll say it all the time, where he's like, well, I need to take off my like old man glasses and like, and really like, oh, well, I can't like, it's like, yeah, I really want to love, the new Prophets of Rage, but it's like, ultimately it's like, it's not Rage Against the Machine, no matter how much you want it to be, right?
Yeah.
And so you almost need to come to this realization where it's like, well, this is, and that's why like Christian Hall's so brilliant, like, because he's the guy who curated like this entire station and everybody on the air, and like, like the music and everything that we're doing. It's because he's on top of that. He's aware of the trends of what's happening in music, and even like having that foresight where he's like, I don't like it, but the kids will, like, like, I'm not a fan of this, but then it's like, but then you have like myself and like Angela and Graham who are in the meeting where it's like, we're between the ages of, like 25 and 30. And it's like, well, that's the demographic now. Like that's us, and it's almost like it's like, well, I don't know. Like I think that's cool. I think that's a really really wicked song. I get it. It's like, well, okay, hey, let's see.
Yeah,
see what happens.
Cool. So I just kind of want to close out with this question. But are there any like maybe local bands from Calgary that you're like really particularly into?
There's quite a few. I have a difficult time, I guess, like, it's like, because it's like I don't have time to like literally sit down and always like digest albums as a whole.
Yeah.
But it's like there's always bands that like come out with like some songs, and like bands that I feel are I feel like trying to like make a go of things. One of them would be the Northern Coast, which is why I called them out earlier, to get on their social media more. But Northern Coast is one that I'm a fan of. I think there's like some potential there for them to really grow as a band. Nationally 100 are really good. The Heirlooms, now they're called Era, but they're awesome. I think their songs are always so good, and like they're one of those bands I feel are they're good at like seemingly like marketing themselves like online and promoting the shows and like new albums and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And there's like Napalm Palm I'm a big fan of. Who else? I'm trying to think. There's like so many. I'm just like trying to like think of like, and I was like, I don't want to miss anybody, and I don't want to I don't want to feel like I'm like leaving someone out. I mean, like the biggest act to come out of Calgary, like JJ Shiplet. He's been doing really well for himself. Although he's like dubbed into like country, he's still like he's still a rocker at heart. And I think like big things will happen for him. Which I guess is easy to say now that he's like, already getting like really a lot of success. But I believed him from the beginning, so it's fine. And I don't know, like the gals of All Hands on Jane are really wicked. Laura Hickley's really good. And Fake James is awesome. He's got this kind of like I always say it on the air whenever I play him, is like this very like alt J kind of vibe, I feel. I feel like I don't want to like leave the ladies out either. Misha and the Spanks obviously are like ones that we've been backers of since the beginning. And then I guess there's like the I guess they wouldn't be they're Calgary acts, but they are growing. But I'm a big fan of like I've heard some of Michael Bernard Fitzgerald's new stuff. Really excited for that, and Ruben in the Dark, who are no longer local acts, but they're based at Toronto. And same with Fast Romantics. They're these bands that are it's like cool. You need like that. You see, it's like you almost need everybody else in the country to like get on board, and then these people will go forward as well. I think because they have like that stature with their songs, and it's like cool to keep writing and keep doing that.
Awesome.
So I hope I didn't forget any. I'm sure I forgot like tons of bands. A lot of really stellar acts, but those are the ones top of mind that I can think of that I'm a huge fan of.
Awesome. So are there any kind of just final things that you want to say, or?
I guess like for I guess for like local bands, for like what they're doing, because there's a lot of bands I know like that always talk to me about. So well, how do you get on radio, or how do you do these things for like getting like that sort of like next step? Because I actually have I have a buddy who's actually working on a documentary which is about exactly this, where it's called Between a Rock and a Hard Place, and it's about how these bands go from like, it's like, well, how do you go from this like kind of moderate success, even if you get like some radio play, it's like, well, how do you become that big act, you know, like how do you go from like being played on Xposure in Calgary to becoming, you know, the Arkells kind of thing. And I think for a lot of bands, you know, it's continuously working on your music, continuously write, collaborate with other people, get like the whole band involved, like in the music making process, and if like, and this is for like bands who it's like, well, radio's your goal, is to really think about like, well, what is kind of popular right now, and where are the trends going? Because we get some acts where it's like, you know, this would have been a great song, but like that would have been a great song like if the song came out in the 90s, that would have been huge, you know, where it's just like it's too dated. So it's almost like, just like if you're looking to like really make a go of like legitimate like radio success, is to really take a hard look at like what your band is doing on every aspect of it. Like, are these songs great songs? Are you a great live band? Are you promoting yourself in a way that's like everybody should be knowing who you are? You know, everybody should be like seeing your things on Facebook, you know, either fan sharing it or your new music, or you know, what you're putting out there as an act.
Yeah.
And so it's always just continuously work on what you're doing, and don't have any like, I guess like, never have too much like ego, in a sense of, it's like, well, like my band's awesome, this song's awesome, and you can't and you don't know what you're talking about. It's like, I don't want to say I'm always right, like I'm not always right with a lot of these acts, but it's like, I can ultimately tell you, like, you can send me a song, it's like, well, is this ready for radio yet? No, it's a good song, and here's what you can work on, and here's some like things of it. But I'm not a producer. But you know, I'm not a musician. Like, I don't create that kind of stuff. But it's like, I can tell you the bands who have success, there's no like legitimate such thing as an overnight success. A lot of the bands who you think like, wow, we heard about these guys out of the blue, most of the time those acts have been making music for a decade.
Yeah.
You know, like most recent example that I can think of, like one that kind of came out of nowhere, was like X Ambassadors. They had Renegades.
Yeah.
People were like, wow, like, where'd these guys come from? But they were hustling in New York for years, you know.
Yeah.
There's legitimately only one band who I've heard of who's the closest thing to an overnight success that I've heard of in recent memory. They're called Superorganism, and they literally formed like the beginning of 2007,
Yeah.
and have had like some pretty decent radio success in that like year and a half, where it's like, you guys have only been a band for a year, you know, and they've just like tapped into whatever it is they've tapped into, like, to get that success, but like, they're not, you probably don't know who they are, you know, like, so it's like, there's no such thing as that, you know. So I think just humility, I think, is a great asset to have.
Yeah, that's for sure.
That's the word I was looking for, humility.
Yeah, you have to put in the work, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And it's one of the toughest lessons to learn.
Yeah, you just got to admit when something isn't, just isn't at that, isn't where it could be.
Yeah.
And there's certain aspects, and it's like, well, let's keep working at this and make this better. And then there's a certain time to realize, well, like, you're pushing a song that like you think should be a single for radio, and it's like, but maybe you're aiming at the wrong song.
Yeah.
You know, or maybe you're focusing too hard on this track that you're so attached to that it's like, write another song.
Yeah.
No, just write another song already. Who cares? Like, let that song be what it is and write something else. Write something better.
Yeah, for sure. Well, awesome. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Yeah, no problem. I'm sorry it's like your longest episode. Yeah.
Not even. Don't worry about it. Cool. If you liked this episode of the podcast, why not leave a review? You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. For up-to-date information on the podcast, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. You can find us at FrogE Style Productions. That's Frog, the letter E, Style Productions. For more ways to support the show, visit FS Productions.